Welcome to the Dating After Divorce podcast. I'm your host, Shade Curry, and I believe every divorced woman deserves a romantic relationship where she feels safe, loved, and cherished. You can create the most amazing life after divorce, and I will teach you how. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to your Extraordinary Life and Dating After Divorce podcast. I'm your host, Shade Curry, and I still have that little thing with my voice where it's not quite all the way back from not feeling well over the holidays, but I am plowing ahead with recording these episodes for you because I can't wait to get this information out. There's just so much of it. Over early December, I was really just putting down all of my thoughts and what I wanted to get at, and I was like, yeah, there's a lot. So let's go ahead and get started. So what I wanted to talk about today was sort of one of those early phases of divorce, like when you are either hit with, a request for divorce from your ex, or you discovered information about infidelity. I worked with a couple of women in 2025 who discovered that their spouses were cheating on them. And that can bring so much shock. And the reason this happens is that you're living in a particular definition of existence. You're living in a particular geography. You have a particular routine. It's sort of like there are things that we have to tell ourselves are true about the world in order for us to function. We can't have every scenario in the world be possibly true, even though every scenario in the world is possibly true at all times. Your brain can't live in a reality where all of the possible scenarios can be true at one time, because otherwise you can't make any decisions. You can't count on anything. You can't figure out what you're going to eat for breakfast because you got to run the calculations of eating, a waffle versus eating an egg, and you've got to run all that. And our brains, we can't do anything if we have to run all of those. So to function in our world, which that's not a bad thing, we choose a certain definition. We choose a particular identity. We choose particular truths and particular beliefs. And hopefully, we choose truths and beliefs and ideologies. And I say truths, like just the general truth is my spouse loves me. We live together. We get along and no one is cheating on anybody. Or that's not even a thing, right? And so that you can go about your day and go to work and take care of the people that you love. Now, what happens when you discover something like infidelity is that it shatters everything that was hinging on the belief that that was not happening. And so your brain has to enter a new reality to start thinking about, oh my gosh, so what's been going on and how many times and what are all the possibilities? It opens up this can of worms of possibilities that your brain then has to process. And we don't want to process that, not because we're lazy or silly, but because it's a lot of work. It feels unsafe. It feels uncertain to have to step into this whole, it's like going to Mars. And that goes for situations where you're the one who decided to get a divorce, where you're like, you know what, this isn't working for me for all of these reasons. It's still a shock to the system because you've had to say yes, or this is true, or this is not true about the reality that you subscribed to in the past. And not just the reality of your present or the reality of your past, like this is the relationship we've had this whole time. There's that. This is the relationship we've had for the last 20 years. This is what it means. This is who it means that I am. Then you have the reality of your present. This is what I can do today. This is how I can live my life today. There's also the quote unquote reality of your future. So you make certain assumptions about your future based on your assumptions about your past and your assumptions about your present. Now, divorce is one of those things that just blows all of it wide open. It just messes with everything because for some people, depending on your situation, you got to question the past. Now, you don't have to question the past, but you're going to. That's just normal. You're going to question all the trips, all the work trips, all the evenings out. You're going to question everything. And then you're going to question the future, which is like, now what? Like your future now just looks like this crazy ball of uncertainty And you've got to grieve the future that you assumed and that you thought was going to happen. I was talking to a woman, not a client, in the last couple of weeks, and she just found out at close to 60 that her husband wants a divorce. They have been married for 30 years, and he wants a divorce, and he's dating a 25-year-old. Like, and this is not a relationship where there was abuse or toxicity or all of those other things that make it like, oh, this is absolutely necessary. This is just quote unquote one of those things. And so you can imagine for someone like her, and when she was referred to me, the person who referred her said she's just not able to face up to what's happening. She's not able to engage with it. And I get that. That is shock. She is basically in shock and going through this like rethinking of her whole life. And I don't even know if this person is in that space of even rethinking yet, because opening up depending on the kind of person that you are and your ability to grapple with some of these larger questions and larger possibilities, and what it means for you. Again, relationships are one of those things that are just so different for everyone. She might not even be ready to even face up to the reality, which could put her in a very vulnerable situation when it comes to the divorce. So that's why we avoid reality. That's why denial is often the very first pit stop when it comes to divorce, depending on where you are. Now, even for those who decided to divorce, you've had to go through that journey to get to the point where you're like, oh yeah, I'm good to go. One thing I do want to say is that just because you've overcome a certain level of denial to move forward with a divorce doesn't mean that the habitual pattern of denial isn't still there. And so what I found with several of my clients is they're like, okay, I'm ready to do this divorce thing, but they will sometimes be in denial about their soon-to-be ex's behavior and what they are likely to do during the divorce. They're constantly blindsided, because even though they faced one reality, they're not facing the other realities, or they're not facing the reality of how it impacts their children and putting protective devices in place for the kids or protective devices in place for themselves. And so the question I want to ask you is, if you're someone who is contemplating divorce or in the middle of a divorce, or you find yourself like constantly like blindsided, in shock, wondering what's going on, asking yourself questions like, why is this happening to me? How could this be happening to me? I can't believe in fact, that one phrase that used to go through my mind was, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe this is happening. If you find that phrase being a phrase that comes up when you have these chaotic situations happen, you might have a habit of slipping into denial, or a habit of not connecting directly with reality when it comes to certain situations in your life. And so those are some of the warning signs that you have that. And this doesn't mean that you're like out of touch. These are just patterns and survival mechanisms that different people will use, that we will all use at different times to sort of protect ourselves from things that our brain thinks is too big for us to handle. And all of us have been through things in life. So you might have moments or situations that trigger parts of you that are still very vulnerable. Parts of your, what psychologists will call your inner child, can get triggered, and then denial can come up as a protective device in that moment. The problem with letting that be your protective device is if you slip into denial and you don't face reality, reality is still going to do what it's going to do. So like for the example that I was giving about this person that I was talking to, who was talking about her husband wanting to date someone younger, is that her choice to not engage with the reality, or her inability to engage with that reality, does not protect her from what is actually happening, and does not prevent what is happening from continuing to happen. And so the goal of having either a therapist or a coach helping you work through that is to say, okay, this is really, really hard for me to look at and for me to think about, but there are consequences if I don't. There are financial consequences, physical consequences. if this person does not like lawyer up or start to figure out how to protect her assets or protect herself, she could find herself in a situation that not only does she lose her spouse, she ends up at a loss financially because she did not prepare for that journey. Not only did she not prepare, she gave the other party ample time to prepare. And a person who is willing to hurt her in that way potentially could be willing to hurt her in other ways, could be willing to hurt her financially, could want to move their assets in ways that she can't recover if she decides to engage with reality down the line. And so that's why these considerations are important. So I want to talk about my own, sort of like my own cycle. Maybe I should have led with this, but I didn't want to lead with like some of the more dire situations because everyone is kind of across the board with these things. So I remember I got divorced after 17 years of marriage. By the time the divorce was done, we were like looking at 20 years, somewhere there. And I remember being very confused at different points in the marriage. And there was something that I did at one point, even though I did decide to stay in the marriage at that time, I had a hard time kind of like understanding what was happening. I was like, well, I mean, it seems like when things are good, things are really, really good and everything is awesome. We've got plenty of money, got a gigantic home, kids seem to be thriving. And then all of a sudden, like something really bad will happen and everything is crazy and chaotic and whatever. And I'm like, what is going on? And I mean, I wasn't the kind of person who like would talk to people necessarily, and I wasn't in therapy. I literally had just started reading the book Boundaries. I was starting to figure out like, this is not normal. And I think I had kind of gotten to the point where I was like, this situation is not normal. But what would happen was, I was a stay-at-home mom, I had kids, I was a foster parent, I was homeschooling mom. So I was really busy. And that's one of the challenges that I help my clients with now is making space to figure out what you want. I didn't have space to think about what was going on with me, what was going on with the marriage, I was just busy all of the time, which is another way to hide. It's another way to escape from reality. And so these things would happen, like things would be fine. And then all of a sudden this tension would build up and then my ex would start raging. There was just always this cycle, which I found out later has a name. It's called the cycle of abuse. And the word abuse may or may not apply in your situation. So when I say abuse, it's not necessarily, physical abuse definitely applies from there, and it came from that angle. But it really just describes a cycle of like, things. If you find in your situation where it's like everything's really good all of a sudden, and then everything's really bad, and then you go back and forth from those extremes. You find yourself living in the really, really good, especially when you're thinking about leaving or you're thinking about this isn't working for me. And your brain is like, what do you mean? All these times were really, really good, right? What you want to do is look at this cycle of abuse, and you can put whatever name you want on it. I like to put the cycle of drama on it, which is different from the drama triangle, which is more like you have people playing certain patterns in family drama. This is more the cycle of abuse where if you look it up and you just Google it and look at the images, there are 4 phases. One is you have tensions building. The first step to successful online dating is your dating profile. Now, what if you could create a dating profile that makes all the difference to your online experience? Imagine having a profile so magnetic that quality matches stop mid-scroll to connect with you. The people you want to talk to you say, oh my God, I've got to talk to her. You want a profile that instantly communicates who you are at your core and attracts people who genuinely align with what matters most to you.
So I want to share with you the Captivate dating profile system, where you'll learn how to create a profile that stops the scroll of the person who's a match for you, captures attention immediately with authentic value-based content, showcases your true self in a way that resonates with the man you want to talk to, and naturally filters out people who are mismatches before they waste your time. So I want you to check out the Captivate dating profile system at shadecurry.com/dating. That's SADECURRY/dating. And for the price of dinner out, you can create the best dating profile ever. And when I say best dating profile, I mean it. It will be uniquely you so that you stop looking like every other woman on the apps. All right, go on over there and check it out.
Right? So tensions increase, breakdown of communication. The people pleaser becomes fearful and feels the need to placate the abuser. So it's sort of like a person who's holding it all together is like doing their very best to like keep the kids quiet and, make sure there's food on the table and make sure everybody's good. Right? And it's like, yeah, no, I got this. And you guys have heard me talk about that. The smart, strong woman syndrome, where you're like, yeah, I got this. I can hold everything together. And then in spite of all that, because you can't control other people, someone is going to, in a sense, whoever the spouse is that projects their own emotions on the other. So in some situations, you have the physical abuser, or you have the narcissistic spouse, or you have the person who's just generally a jerk. Whatever the dynamic is, everyone's situation is different. So I can't really I can't describe all of the scenarios. The goal of this series, again, is to have you, my listener, just kind of think about your scenario and see if any of this applies to you, or if you know someone that it does, and you can send this to them, right? And so then there's the incident. That's where the crazy happens, when things get really crazy and you're like, how is this happening? Can't believe this is happening. I can't believe he got into this road rage. I can't believe he locked me out of the house. I can't believe he, went to Vegas and spent all our money. Whatever the thing is, I can't believe he cheated. Again, whatever the thing is, then you have the incident, right? And then there's all the blaming, anger, whatever it is. Now, this is where typically, as the person who's like, yeah, you know what, I don't really want to be a part of this anymore, generally you're thinking about leaving at that point. You're like, yeah, this isn't working for me. I want to leave. But unfortunately, you will have the other person in the situation be like, well, I want to be able to have this incident, but I also don't want to leave. I also want you here doing all the things that you do. So then there's going to be an apology, and there'll be excuses, and then there might be leveling the playing field where it's like, well, you contributed to this and blah, 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 and all of those things, and victim blaming, all the things that can happen. Again, think about your own scenario, right? And you might start thinking about all the logistics that would go into actually moving forward. And your brain starts to be like, well, maybe it's not so bad. Things aren't so terrible. It's fine, right? People start telling you things like you're overreacting and, marriage is work and you should, all those things happen. And there's a reconciliation, right? And it's like, okay, things are fine. We'll go to therapy. We'll do this. We'll do that. And then after that is the calm, because we don't want to dwell in all that. You want to believe that you are fine and that you have a future and things could be okay, which, yes, as you should. And now you go into the, I think some of the cycle images you'll find on the internet, we'll call it the honeymoon phase, which is everything's calm. Nothing bad is happening. In fact, everybody's happy. Everyone is relieved. There is a relief that comes from like, oh God, thank God that's over. There's a hope that like, oh my God, thank God none of that is going to happen again. Right? And as time goes on, then the tension starts to build again, because when certain people can't handle or don't want to contribute to that relationship or the peace or whatever, there's just going to be that anger building. The abuser is going to be like, well, this person is doing this and this person is doing that, or they're not doing what I want, or whatever the thing is. Again, this is your situation. Or the person who is unfaithful is already like starting to like look around again. Whatever the situation is, it just goes around in that cycle. And that is what makes it really hard to connect with the reality of the situation. Now, because it's a cycle, it can go on for years and years and years. Sometimes, I've talked to people where there would be 6 months between cycles. Those are almost the worst because then you can go 20 years. What to look out for is that with every cycle, the overall health of the unit or the overall health of the marriage will dip a little bit lower. So it seems like things are better, but not the relationship never is at a healthy place long term. One of the things that I think in my situation was tough was that I hadn't had a lot of examples of healthy relationships. So I kept comparing the worst part of the relationship to the best parts of the same relationship, which was already unhealthy in and of itself. And this is why reading widely and talking to professionals can be really helpful in saying, hey, this part of your pattern where you think things are healthy is actually not healthy. Because if you look at something that's really healthy, it is way, 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 way above what you're thinking about. So I encourage you to take a look at the cycle and see if anything there applies to what you are going through or what you are thinking about. Now, the other thing to think about is, what do you do to almost, instead of waiting until the cycle hits a rock bottom, what can you do to get there? So back to my story. So I was in that basically cycle I just described, right? And mine wasn't physical abuse in that sense, but it was more like just a lot of emotional, psychological cruelty and raging anger, gigantic anger issues. And at a certain point, I was like I said, this isn't normal. But I also noticed that I would forget. So I started noticing that between the cycle, there was just so much of a brain fog at a certain point that I couldn't remember, why were things bad again? What happened that last time? And so I decided, I got a notebook. I remember when I got this notebook and I was like, okay, I labeled it, I think I labeled it 8 weeks. So 8 times 7, 56 days or 48 days, whatever. And I was just going to write everything, just one page. And every day I was just going to write down my experiences with my spouse every day for 48 days. And that was it. That was what led me to actually connect with the reality of my situation. And I wasn't documenting this for court. Honestly, court wasn't even on my mind at that point. I wasn't even thinking about leaving. I was really just trying to own my own mental state and my own reality. What is really happening? What is going on? Why am I always confused? Right? And I'm really glad I did that for myself, because I think even back then, I had my own back. I was I trusted myself and I was willing to believe myself, even if other people didn't believe me, which that's a whole other podcast episode when you're talking about whether or not other people believe you. And so documenting your actual experience can help you see the cycle that you are in and how you are playing into the cycle and how you are participating, not causing necessarily or doing something wrong, but playing into it and not owning that you have choices within the cycle. It can help you. Documenting over a 2-month or a 3-month period can help you become conscious. And that is the key. Becoming conscious about what your experience is in the relationship. When you're with someone who has narcissistic tendencies, they love to isolate incidents. This incident is one incident and has nothing to do with any other incident that has ever happened. Nothing's contributed to what's going on, so that they can keep everything contained to what the narrative is in the moment. And that causes a lot of confusion if you're the person who's trying to hold it all together. So what can be helpful is to say, okay, well, over this pattern, and the other person does not have to accept the pattern. That's the other thing. I think often when I've talked to other people about this, once they see the pattern, they're like, aha, I got it. Now I'm going to go show this to all the other people and they have to see it too. No, that is not how human beings work. They do not work like that at all. This is for you. And one of the things that I'm constantly redirecting my clients to is to do things for themselves. They're often like wanting to do things so that other people can see it and then everything can be exactly how they want it, and not being willing to like just 100% focus in on their own experience. The documentation is for you, for your own consciousness, for your own self-validation, for your own self-advocacy, for your own ability to like be in your own skin and feel like, okay, I know what's like, I'm not crazy, right? I'm not crazy. I'm thinking right, owning your reality and backing yourself up with your own thinking. One of the challenges that can come with not wanting to face reality and being in denial is that you don't think that anyone will back you up. And it's possible that nobody will back you up. But one thing you want to do is to always have the capacity and the strength to back yourself up, to be like, you know what? My relationship with myself is always going to be the longest relationship I ever have. I will be here for all of my own experiences. And it's important that I can live with myself and live in my own mind. And that is really, really the very first step. It's not about what the other person sees or what your friends see or even what the courts see or what your attorney sees. I'm going to talk about all those people as we go on. But this is the first step into being with yourself, knowing your own experience, being conscious about it, embracing your own experience, and then also embracing the reality of what is happening. When women tell me, oh, I feel stuck, this is one of the things that's happening. They're stuck because there are variables and situations and experiences and things that are happening in their lives that they are not willing to engage with at a raw level. And so they can't move forward because their brain won't let them move forward, because it's like, yeah, I want to go ahead and do this thing. But subconsciously, and maybe not even that deeply subconscious, like just at the back of your mind, you know that there are other variables, but you don't know how to verbalize them to yourself. And you're afraid that if you verbalize them, then really, really bad things can happen. But you have to, because you do live in a reality. And a lot of your power comes from being able to engage in that reality. One of the beliefs I had as a young woman was that I didn't have the strength to grapple with reality, that I always needed somebody, I always needed people to help me grapple with reality. And that belief was very, very damaging. And so if you feel like, oh, I don't want to look at these things because I don't feel like I have the ability to grapple with them or work through them, not thinking about them or working them doesn't help, because how are you going to get the experience? How are you going to get the ability and the skill to grapple with reality if you do not begin to engage with reality? So I hope this was, coherent, because it was very, very high level. I tried not to get into too many specifics around it because the principles apply. The principle of grappling with reality, experiencing reality, owning your own thoughts and feelings, becoming conscious, all those things apply, but they apply to everybody. And so I didn't want to get too deep into, particular situations. So I hope keeping it at a high level still made it very, very useful for each and every one of you listening. If you know someone who is thinking about a divorce or going through a divorce, or having a hard time with their divorce, I would love it if you shared this podcast episode with them and let them know that first of all, they're not alone in that kind of disconnection from reality. Like, this is a very human, normal thing. And so that they can have permission to give themselves a little self-compassion. You're in shock. This is stressful. And also, hopefully something in here will help them. All right. So this episode was all about facing reality, documentation, understanding the cycles of drama or cycles of abuse that can happen, and hopefully starting to find a little spot in that cycle where you can jump off and create something new. All right, everyone, thank you for your time and attention today. I always appreciate you. And if you love this, please rate the podcast. Give us some stars on whatever platform you're on. Write a review. I love it, even if it's an anonymous review. And just let other people find the podcast so that they can get the help and information that they need. All right. Thank you all. I will see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening today. If you are ready to get married after divorce, I want to invite you to download my free 8-video training specifically designed to help divorced women date with ease and get married again. Head over to shadecurry.com to get started. That's SADECURRY.com. I'll see you inside.